Audio made possible by www.jackettome.com. Audio Fanfiction Productions presents Wide Awake. Fanfiction written by Angscotta003. Fanfiction inspired by the Twilight Saga written by Stephanie Meyer. Chapter 25. Mocha Desperation Sensations. Bella's point of view. I awoke to a loud banging that made me nuzzle further into Edward's chest. I winced with every bang, barely conscious. I could hear a muffled booming voice behind the banging as I rose and fell with each breath of the chest I was lying on. I hugged Edward tighter, willing it to go away. All of a sudden I was being shot up into the sitting position against Edward's chest.
Hold on.
Edward screamed in a panicked voice. I stiffened as I realized the muffled voice belonged to Emmett. At Edward's door.
Come the fuck on. Carlisle's waiting for you.
He yelled through the door. My eyes grew wide and I glanced forward to Edward, whose eyes were as wide as mine, with a frantic expression on his face. Then I heard it. The doorknob rattling. Panicked, I grasped at the covers to hide my bare torso, nearly elbowing Edward in the face. He grabbed my arm and his face softened in relief. He mouthed locked to me as the rattling subsided. He darted his eyes at the thankfully locked door.
Fuck off. I'll be down in 10.
He yelled back at the door. I cringed at the loud noise in my ear as he glanced back at me apologetically. He held on to my arm lightly, waiting for confirmation that Emmett had left. We stared into each other's eyes. A silent panic conversation going on. I was worried that something was wrong. That they suspected I was up here. He clearly saw that worry in my eyes because he shook his head at me with serious expression on his face. Eventually we could hear Emmett's loud footsteps retreating down the hallway. We both let out a deep breath of relief as our postures relaxed. Edward fell back onto the bed, while I stayed upright. He began grumbling and running his fingers through his messy hair. All I could make out was,
"Impatient fucking bastards. Too fucking old for that shit. 13 minutes. Perfectly good sleep."
I chanced to glance at the clock and realized it was only 5 in the morning. Realizing that it was probably a good idea for me to get home early anyways, I reluctantly lifted my knee from Edward's side and climbed off of him. He kept his eyes shut. Either because he was too tired to open them, or because he was giving me privacy, I wasn't sure. But I fetched my sweater from the end of the bed, and slid it back over my head quickly. My hips were stiff from our unusual position, and I made a promise to myself to never do it again as I waddled to the sofa to put my shoes on. I threw them on quickly, pulling my hoodie over my head hastily, fearing that Emmett might return again. I snatched my bag up and began stuffing the used containers from the previous night's meal into it. I fished his cookies from the bag and dropped them off beside the alarm clock that still hadn't gone off yet. I turned to Edward, still lying in the bed, and he was staring at me with the most heartbreaking desolate expression on his face. I smiled at him, unwilling to let him be sad over any of the previous night's events. He smiled back sadly, and waved me over to the bed. I climbed up without hesitation, ready to receive my morning cheek kiss. He sat up and leaned over to flick on the lamp, illuminating the dark room in bright light, and making me squint against it. Edward was squinting too, as he leaned into my cheek, and planted one single soft kiss onto it. He held his lips there, on my cheek for a few seconds. I closed my eyes and relished the touch of his lips against me. Eventually he eased himself back down onto the bed. But his expression had turned hollow, and impossibly sadder. My heart clenched and I wanted to ask him what was wrong, but I was too afraid that Emmett would return while I was doing it. But I had to let him know that whatever he was thinking or feeling, it wouldn't make me turn away. So I leaned into him slowly. His sad green eyes never left mine as I eased down over him, sliding my hand down below the blanket covering his chest, and felt my way across his skin, to find a ring hanging around it. I grasped it tightly and planted a soft kiss on his warm neck. He remained motionless. I trailed my lips up his neck to his ear. "Nothing could make me love you any less," I whispered sincerely, letting go of the ring and pulling my hand back out of the covers while I climbed out of bed. His expression hadn't changed any. If anything, it just made it worse. I let out a shaky breath and glanced at the door desperately, wishing we had more time. But I had to leave, so I turned around and exited the French door, plunging myself into the cold December darkness as I left Edward alone and desolate. Alice awoke no more than 3 minutes after I walked in the door to the kitchen. I was unbelievably lucky my hair wasn't tangled from Edward's nuzzling. And for the first time that morning, thankful for the awkward position we slept in that prevented it from happening. I didn't even have time to pull my hoodie off before she bounced into the kitchen. She quirked an eyebrow at my hoodie, and I shrugged, letting her assume I slept in my full clothing last night. She shrugged back and hopped onto the stool, vibrating with excitement that Christmas morning was finally upon us. I began making a ridiculously large Christmas breakfast, earning Eliza's festive holiday approval. After the three of us ate our big breakfast, we all opened our gifts. It was my second Christmas without my mother, but my first one with my aunt and cousin. They eased the painful bitterness I was feeling at the fact she couldn't be there. Alice went sort of crazy with gifts. Our tree was overflowing with shiny wrapping paper spilling out from all sides. Some for me and me, but many for Jasper, Emmett, and Rosalie as well. She graced me with more adorable clothing that I would probably never wear, most likely with the intention that I would be more inclined to wear them if they were a gift. Apparently she and Edward shared the same philosophy when it came to pitching about Christmas gifts. So I smiled and thanked her profusely, hoping it would suffice because I wasn't wearing them. I think she probably knew. By noon, we were all exhausted. Me more so since I had only slept 4 hours the night before. Though I was feeling very thankful for Emmett's intrusion. I spent the day cleaning up after all the presents and large breakfast that I had made. It took me 3 hours, as me kept insisting I leave it, but I was happy for the distraction. The weight of last night's events weighed quite heavily on me. Jasper and Rose came by that evening to exchange presents with Alice. I stayed in the kitchen while they did it, not really feeling up to company or pretending to be normal for an hour or two. I cooked our Christmas meal in solace, as the sounds of laughter and scolding came from the room across from me. I think Jasper and Rose weren't really getting along very well since the whole Alice thing. Rose was obviously not approving of the relationship, for reasons I couldn't fathom. Maybe she didn't think Jasper was good enough for Alice, or perhaps the other way around. It was a situation that would be similar to Eliza's reaction if she ever found out about Edward and me. It made me more sympathetic of Alice, and gave me good ammunition for when, or if she ever did find out. They left right as I got dinner finished, needing to spend it with their family. I had been hinting at Esme to invite the Cullens over for Christmas dinner all week. She had refused when I eventually came out and asked her, opting instead for a nice small dinner with just the three of us. I felt like it had something to do with me, but I didn't say anything, happy at least for the intimacy of the affair. I did talk her into taking them our surplus dinner. I actually made them a whole meal separate from ours, but they would never know the difference, and Esme seemed silently pleased by my generosity, likely anticipating the appetite Emmett would have. When we were finished, she ran a large box over across the yard. I smiled as she made her way to the door, watching from the front porch as Dr. Cullen invited her inside with a wide, surprised smile. I lounged around the living room for the rest of the evening with Alice. We were both full and tired, rubbing our stomachs in misery and swearing we weren't eating anything else for a week. She grimaced at me when I got up to make cookies, but it was routine. I knew she'd end up eating them anyways. And when they both finally fell asleep fat and happy at 9:30, I began packing my bag with the Mocha Desperation Sensations cookies I had made, and loads of food. I bolted out the door at 10, anxious to see Edward, and hoping that his mood had brightened a bit since that morning. I tapped on the door softly, feeling particularly freezing in the cold rain that was coming down